Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate you taking the time to view my presentation, and I hope that all of you are well and healthy. Today I'm going to present to you on my thesis entitled Dorothy Thompson's Second Awakening, Activism on Behalf of Palestine. It will be covering the time period starting from 1939 to 1961. My broader topic is the anti-Zionist movement in America, which I examine through the case study of Dorothy Thompson and the American Friends of the Middle East, the AFME for short. The reason behind my decision to focus my topic on Thompson's political activism, which she conducted first through her career as a journalist and later through her work for the AFME, is because it provides an interesting and unique case study. It presented me with the opportunity to examine both her activism on behalf of the Zionist movement and the anti-Zionist movement in America and trace the ideological thread that motivated her work. I'm going to begin by giving a brief background on Dorothy Thompson. Thompson was an American print journalist and radio broadcaster who was best known for her foreign correspondence and her syndicated column On the Record, which was carried by newspapers across the country. She gained her popularity during the Second World War for her candid and brave news coverage against the Nazi regime. In 1936, Hitler requested to expel her from Nazi Germany for her critical anti-Nazi reporting, which made her the first American reporter to be deported from Nazi Germany. Upon her return, Thompson was hailed as a national hero, and her career skyrocketed from there. She was labeled by Times Magazine as one of the two most influential American women alongside Eleanor Roosevelt. In addition to her journalism, she would soon also become well known for her political commentary. In 1936, Thompson was hired as a columnist for the New York Herald Tribune and was granted the freedom to cover any topic with the luxury of vast syndication. Her devotion to human rights, freedom of speech, and American liberalism characterized her reporting style and pushed her towards reporting on political affairs. The political nature of her commentary, which colored most of what she reported on, made her a controversial figure from the start of her career. However, Thompson continued to cultivate her reputation as an honest and unbiased newswoman. Her career helped her establish a strong network of friendship with important figures inside and outside the United States, which aided in establishing her reputation as a first-class journalist and increased her influence on American public opinion. Thompson's activism on behalf of the Palestinian issue led her to work along with 24 other activists to found the American Friends of the Middle East in 1951. The AFME was one of the most important anti-Zionist organizations to emerge during the Cold War. In addition to offering cultural exchange programs, the AFME also advanced pro-Arab, anti-Zionist policies and views in the United States in an attempt to counter common misconceptions about the Middle East. The organization was based on the previous efforts made by Kermit Roosevelt to counter the growing Zionist movement and establish relief organizations for Palestinian refugees. This can be seen in organizations such as the Committee for Justice and Peace in the Holy Land and the Holy Land Emergency Liaison Program, which would all be incorporated later into the structure of the AFME. The organization's goal remained consistent with its agenda, which focused on promoting friendship and understanding between the United States and the people of the Middle East through a number of cultural exchanges which took form in three major activities. One, in the form of intercultural exchange programs, two, in the form of foreign lectures, and three, in the form of tourist programs. The main purpose of the AFME was to bring the Middle East closer to the American public. Before I begin, I'm going to give a general overview of the most significant markers in Thompson's career. In 1934, Thompson was expelled from Germany by Hitler, which led her career to skyrocket, and she became one of the most popular figures standing against Nazism. Her dedication to human freedom motivated her pro-Zionist ideology throughout the 1930s and 1940s until her visit to Palestine in 1945. After visiting Palestine, Thompson returned to America with a new point of view on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Her reporting on the matter, which had now become critical of Zionism, pushed the New York Post to drop her on the record column. Thompson's activism on behalf of the Palestinian issue pushed her and other like-minded Americans to establish the AFME in 1951. In 1957, Thompson was forced to retire as the president of the AFME by her editors at the Bill Syndicate, or she would face the cancellation of her column. In 1961, Dorothy Thompson passed away. My thesis examines the reasons behind Thompson's radical ideological shift that occurred after her trip to Palestine. The American journalist went from being an avid supporter of the Zionist cause throughout the 1930s and mid 1940s to adopting a strong pro Arab anti Zionist stance from 1945 onwards. While there is a notable amount of secondary literature covering Thompson's activism on behalf of the Zionist cause, her activism on behalf of Palestine has been largely ignored. My thesis traces Thompson's political activism in both the Zionist and anti Zionist movement to a single ideological viewpoint, which causes Thompson to advocate for the rights of Palestinians. It makes the claim that there is a moral and ideological continuity between Thompson's political activism in the Zionist movement and the anti Zionist movement. My methodology is my archival base. The majority of the primary sources on which my thesis relies were taken from the Dorothy Thompson papers at Syracuse University. These archives hold detailed records of Thompson's incoming and outgoing correspondence, family papers, speeches, and the complete body of journalistic work she archived during her career. Thompson's personal papers highlight her upbringing, feminism, career success, and her affiliation with both the pro Zionist and anti Zionist movements. Thompson's views represented a significant departure from the American public's perception of Zionism. Her personal papers reveal the diverse methods by which she challenged the American public's perceptions, as well as her critics. In addition to the Syracuse papers, I utilized various digital archives to access the AFME's annual reports and other publications. The primary sources on the AFME were used to show how Thompson's personal activism manifested itself in the AFME during her time as its president. In the first chapter, entitled Formative Years, which covers the time period from 1893 to 1945, I show how Thompson's formative years were crucial in the creation of her future political activism. Beginning with her Christian upbringing, Thompson acquired her basic sense of morality and social responsibility from growing up under the Methodist Church. Her father's occupation as a minister in the church played a crucial role in molding Thompson's character and created the ideological structure that she would later use as the basis of her activism. Thompson had a really close relationship with her father, and that really influenced the way she saw the world. Her undergraduate university years at Syracuse University from 1910 to 1914 paved the way for her first political engagement and activism on behalf of minority groups. Her life as an undergraduate fostered her feminist beliefs, which in turn contributed to her participation in the suffrage movement in the years leading up to the passage of the 19th Amendment in 1920, granting women the right to vote. Shortly after her graduation, Thompson used what little savings she had and began her journalistic career by covering human rights stories all around Europe. Her career path led her to Germany, where she became an avid supporter of the Jewish cause. The chapter ends by addressing Thompson's position regarding the German question, which led to some controversy and provided her with her first experience of strong public opposition to her views. I won't get into the controversy now for reasons of time, but I'm happy to discuss it in the Q&A. The second chapter, entitled From Zion to Palestine, starts off with Thompson's visit to Palestine in 1945. During her visit to the Holy Land, Thompson underwent her second Great Awakening. After witnessing the implications that the Zionist campaign had on Palestine, the Palestinian refugee crisis, Israeli terrorist acts, and in general the stark difference between the information that had been reported by Zionist organizations in America and the realities on the ground in Palestine, the American journalist ended up radically changing her political stance on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. She gained a newfound empathy to the Palestinian cause, which pushed her to change her pro-Zionist stance. After her trip, Thompson became vocal about her experience in Palestine in various outlets such as her personal correspondence, public speeches, lectures, and in numerous journal articles and magazines. Thompson stressed that the establishment of an Israeli state was not in fact, quote, the liberal crusades that the Zionist leaders envisaged, end quote. She explained to her supervisor, Ted Thackeray, editor and manager of the New York Post, that, quote, the situation there is not the way it has been presented by many of the Zionists. It is one of the most complicated and difficult problems on earth today. End quote. In 1947, Thompson lost her on the record column in the New York Post because of her new political stance. Thackeray claimed that the column, which had lasted for 7 years, was dropped due to the lack of space and its dullness. Others, including Thompson, speculated differently. The chapter outlines Thompson's various activities on behalf of the Palestinian cause, including the establishment of the AFME in 1951. It details Thompson's influence on the activities of the AFME and asserts that the AFME was an extension of Thompson's own ideological perspective on the issue of Palestine. To Thompson, there was an obvious moral and political link between her work in the Zionist movement during the 1930s and in her anti-Zionist activity through her work in the AFME during the 1950s. This link was present in Thompson's continuous emphasis on the refugee problem, which she believed was a crisis born out of the shortcomings of the post-war human rights system. The third chapter, entitled The Ultimatum, examines the years from 1957 to 1961. It begins by discussing the letter Thompson received from her editors at the Bill Syndicate in 1957 asking her to either step down from her position as the president of the AFME or to retire her career as a journalist. Her editors and many of the newspapers that published her believed that Thompson could not and should not be an activist and a journalist at the same time. To them, it was as if Thompson was trying to do two inherently contradictory things, because being an activist was compromising her objectivity as a journalist. The chapter also covers the pressure that Thompson's editors and publishers underwent as a result of her pro-Palestinian advocacy. The many letters sent to Wheeler, who was Thompson's editor, and to the newspapers that published Thompson indicated that there was in fact an organized effort aiming to stop American newspapers from publishing Thompson's work. While both her editors and publishers acknowledged this campaign, they still believed that she should choose one career path. Thompson chose to continue as a journalist for the Bill Syndicate and spent one more year publishing articles before retiring. To conclude, through the examination of Thompson's life and career journey, my thesis examined two interconnected aspects of the journalist's life to try and shed light on the beginnings of the American anti-Zionist movement. Firstly, my research demonstrated that the failure of the American anti-Zionist movement to establish itself in American society was due to the size and strength of its countering movement, the Zionist movement. The Zionist movement had started long before any significant signs of the anti-Zionist movement began to show in American society. Additionally, World War II and the horrific realities of the Holocaust gave the Zionist movement a strong base of support in the American Jewish community and a dire reason to successfully organize itself. This hindered the development of the anti-Zionist movement, and it wouldn't be until later on when the anti-Zionist movement begins to gain support in America. The second aspect that my thesis highlights is that even with the newfound base of support, the anti-Zionist movement was working against an already embedded frame of reference which depicted the Middle East, and specifically Palestine, in a negative light to the American public and halted any true effort of countering this narrative. When examining Thompson's career on behalf of both the Zionist and anti-Zionist movement, it became apparent that there was an ideological continuity between Thompson's political activism in both movements. The main factor that motivated Thompson to switch her political stance on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict was the refugee crisis that it created. Humanitarianism was a clear driving factor in Thompson's life, as it caused her to advocate for both the Jewish and Palestinian causes, and it was the main factor that influenced her political stance on the conflict. Other secondary motives which influenced Thompson's decision to adopt the Palestinian cause was because of what she believed the Zionist agenda was doing to American society. After experiencing the backlash, Thompson feared the implications that the organized Zionist effort was doing to American liberal values, such as the value of free speech. Thank you all for zooming in. I will now be taking any question you may have virtually.